What if I told you? Archie may not be Prince Harry's biological son, and the man in question is none other than Prince Andrew. That sentence alone is enough to shatter every public image you've ever seen of the Sussexes, or of the royal family's most whispered about scandal magnet. But that's just the surface. Because behind palace walls, a storm has been brewing for years, and it finally just exploded in the most horrifying, humiliating, and world-shaking way imaginable. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Prince Harry didn't just erupt in anger. He didn't just raise his voice. According to one Montecito insider, he destroyed a room. A laptop screen cracked in half. A decanter shattered. A screaming match that ended with Harry collapsing into tears on the marble floor, clutching something in his hand. Not a photo, not a ring, not a letter, but a test result. And that's where this story truly begins. Let me ask you something. What would you do if you found out the child you've been raising, with love, with sacrifice, with every drop of loyalty you had left, might not even be yours? Would you scream? Would you confront the person you thought was the love of your life? Or would you fall silent, afraid that saying the truth out loud might make it real? Because that's the exact moment Prince Harry found himself in. Alone. Betrayed. And with no palace staff to spin it, no crown to shield him, no press office to protect him from the blowback. Just one man, one truth, and one devastating possibility. Meghan Markle may have been pregnant by Prince Andrew. And if that's true, the implications aren't just personal. They're historical. They're institutional. They could collapse everything. But how did we get here? And more importantly, why now? Let's rewind, but not too far. The beginning of the end. For years, the world has watched the Sussexes through a fog of mixed narratives: victimhood, vindication, betrayal, independence. A media circus of Netflix deals, podcast pullouts, royal rifts, and interview bombshells. But while the headlines fixated on Megxit, Spotify, and who made who cry over flower girl dresses, something far more sinister was happening behind the scenes. A silent investigation. A private chain of documents, carefully hidden from the public, and a series of people. Nannies, aides, staffers, even a palace doctor, who started whispering the same disturbing pattern. The dates didn't add up. The pregnancy timeline? Off by several weeks. The official hospital records? Incomplete. The birth certificate? Heavily redacted. And Archie's resemblance to Harry? Well, let's just say, not everyone in the firm was convinced. But here's the twist. No one wanted to say it out loud. Not the tabloids. Not the biographers. Not even the palace. Because who could possibly be the alternative father? A mystery until now. Until a newly leaked batch of emails surfaced from a private legal exchange involving none other than Prince Andrew, tied to an unrelated Epstein lawsuit. And nestled deep within those messages, hidden in plain sight, was a reference that stunned everyone who read it. If the pregnancy becomes public, make sure the file is destroyed. The Sussex team must never know. The pregnancy, the file, the Sussex team. That's when alarm bells started ringing. And that's when Harry, still reeling from years of family rejection and media manipulation, went looking for the one thing no one wanted him to find. The truth. Why now? Some people are asking, why is this story exploding in December 2025? Why not during the Oprah interview? Why not during the coronation drama? Why not during Queen Elizabeth's funeral, when the world was laser-focused on the royal family? Here's why. Because the proof wasn't ready. The smoking gun, a combination of digital DNA test logs, archival ultrasound images, and a nanny's secret journal, was only just released in a court case involving an anonymous whistleblower. And when Harry's legal team caught wind of it, they were stunned. It wasn't just a rumor anymore. It was documented, cross-referenced, verified. At first, Harry denied it. Then he got quiet. Then he exploded. Witnesses say he locked himself in the garden suite of his Montecito estate for nearly 7 hours. Meghan was nowhere to be seen. A staffer described the sound of something crashing, then the eerie silence that followed. And when Harry emerged, his face was red. His eyes were hollow. And clenched in his fist was that same piece of paper, soaked with sweat. What was written on it? One sentence. Just one. Subject shares 99.98% paternal match with HRH, the Duke of York. That sentence would not just destroy his peace of mind. It would torch the very foundation of his identity, his fatherhood, and his marriage. But here's the real question. Was it true? Or was it planted? Planting the seed of doubt. That's what makes this scandal so much darker than your average royal tabloid fodder. Because in this twisted saga, everyone has a motive. Prince Andrew, desperate to bury anything that might add to his already catastrophic public image. Meghan, whose past remains one of the most heavily curated and controlled narratives in modern celebrity history. Harry, possibly used as a pawn, as a beard, or as a fall guy in a scheme far bigger than even he could imagine. And the palace? Let's just say, plausible deniability has never been more convenient. This wasn't a scandal. This was a time bomb. And for years, people in the know have tried to keep it from exploding. But every cover-up leaves cracks. And now, those cracks have become canyons. From a cryptic audio recording of Prince Andrew muttering about the child we never speak of, to a nanny's stolen photo of an ultrasound with the wrong name on it, to Meghan's furious attempt to stop a journalist from publishing a piece titled The Secret Prince. The clues were always there. The pieces just hadn't been put together until now. And Harry? He's piecing it together in real time. What's at stake? This isn't just about two men and one woman. This is about the monarchy's future. Think about it. If Archie's paternity is truly in question, what does that mean for titles? For succession? For public perception? For the billions spent on security, protection, and diplomacy? More importantly, what does it mean for Harry's sanity? This is a man who left everything behind to protect his family. A man who severed ties with his brother, was exiled from royal duty, and became the most talked-about rebel in modern Windsor history. All for what? If this story is true, it wasn't for love. It was for a lie. And the betrayal wouldn't just be between spouses. It would be between uncle and nephew. Or perhaps, father and son. So we have to ask the hard question. Was Meghan ever truly loyal? Or was she playing a game so complex, so ruthless, that not even the palace could track it? The truth they tried to bury. Here's what we know for sure. There is a file. There was a meeting between Meghan and Andrew at Balmoral. There were early warnings from staff. There was an ultrasound that didn't match hospital records. There was a DNA test. And there was a moment when Harry finally learned the truth. Or at least, what he believes to be the truth. Now, whether that moment leads to forgiveness or divorce, confrontation or collapse, is something no one can predict. But what happened next? What Meghan allegedly said during that fateful Balmoral night? What Andrew confessed to on tape? What Doria did to cover it all up? That's where this story takes a turn no one saw coming. Because one betrayal is about to lead to another, and the next revelation? It could burn the entire royal family to the ground. What would you do if the past you thought was buried came crawling out of a dusty box, with a truth sharp enough to slice through your entire future? For Prince Harry, it started with a letter. Not a dramatic confrontation. Not a screaming match. Not a secret agent dropping off an envelope in the dark. No, it began the way many betrayals begin. Quietly. Innocently. It was a late evening in Montecito. The sun had dipped behind the California hills, casting that honey-colored glow over the Sussex estate. Archie was already in bed. Lilibet had just gone down for the night, and Meghan was, according to house staff, taking a long bath in their guest suite. A rare moment of peace, one insider described it. Harry had been sorting through some old belongings, boxes that had arrived from a private storage unit in the UK. The last of Diana's personal effects. Things too sensitive, too emotionally charged to be handled by couriers or assistants. He'd insisted on unpacking them himself. And that's when he found it. A small, pale blue envelope. No markings. No return address. Tucked between an old photo album and a pressed flower he remembered giving his mother when he was 8. It was sealed. Faintly scented. Slightly yellowed with time. But the handwriting? Instantly familiar. Curved. Neat. Elegant. It was Meghan's. A letter she never meant for him to see. Now pause for a second. Let's get into Harry's mindset. He's tired. He's emotionally raw. This box contains memories of his mother, the one person in his life who, in his eyes, never lied to him, never manipulated him, never used him. And here, in the middle of it all, is a letter from Meghan, a letter he'd never read before. He hesitates. His fingers tremble just slightly as he peels open the flap. A part of him thinks, maybe it's an old love letter. Maybe it's just something sweet she tucked in for me to find someday. But it wasn't. As he opened the page, the first words hit like a punch to the ribs. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. The room fell silent. Harry sat back on the rug, the letter clutched in both hands. The air shifted, because what followed wasn't sweet. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't loving. It was a confession. Not direct, not overt, but layered in the kind of cryptic phrasing that people use when they're trying to ease their guilt without exposing the full truth. The letter rambled at first. A meditation on loneliness, on feeling adrift, on the pressure of stepping into a family that never wanted me. Then came the strange part. It was the only time. I swear. It never happened again. I never told him. I never told anyone. I thought I'd missed my cycle from stress. The timing was confusing. Harry blinked. He reread the paragraph. Confusion started giving way to dread. Because these weren't vague thoughts. They weren't poetic musings. They were timestamps. Events. A narrative. One that didn't include him. I never told him. The line that twisted Harry's stomach into knots was this. If it ever came out, it would destroy everything. Not just for you. For the crown. For him. Now who was him? At first, Harry assumed it was Thomas Markle. Or maybe someone from Meghan's early acting career. A producer? An ex-boyfriend? A random blip from the past? But then, one detail changed everything. The letter referenced a location. Balmoral. And a date. September 2018. That sent alarm bells ringing. Harry knows where he was in September 2018, on a military commitment overseas. Meghan had joined him for part of the trip, but not all. He remembered her returning to the UK early for what she claimed was a wellness retreat in Scotland, organized by a friend from Soho House. At the time, he didn't question it. Now his mind was racing. Balmoral. September. Meghan. Alone. He knew who else had been there that week. Prince Andrew. The night comes crashing in. Harry stood up, dizzy. The letter was shaking in his hand now. He stormed out of the study, adrenaline pulsing through his veins, and called out for Meghan. Silence. He found her in the guest suite, casually scrolling on her iPad, wrapped in a bath towel. The room smelled like lavender. Where did you get this? He asked, holding up the letter. She looked up, froze. He saw it immediately, the flicker, the shift behind the eyes. The way her smile collapsed into a stare. You weren't supposed to see that, she whispered. No denial. No surprise. No confusion. Just resignation. That was the moment Harry's world began to fracture. The confrontation. What does this mean? He demanded. What is this? Who were you writing about? Meghan didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for her robe and slowly stood. It was before we were married, she said carefully. It's not what you think. But that wasn't good enough. Harry wanted names. He wanted dates. He wanted truth. You were at Balmoral that weekend, he said. You said it was a retreat. Who was there? She looked away. I told you. Just friends. Which friends? She wouldn't say. That's when he said the name out loud. Andrew. And she flinched. Just slightly. But enough. Jesus, Meghan, he muttered. Tell me it's not true. Emotional spiral. Here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't hit all at once. It starts like a slow leak. Then becomes a flood. Then a full-blown tsunami of rage, confusion, grief, and panic. That night, according to security logs and staff accounts, Harry did the following. Threw a glass of whiskey at the wall. Locked himself in his office for nearly 4 hours. Called a private investigator in London. And then, this is where it gets eerie. He ordered a paternity test kit online. Not for Archie. Not right away. For himself. He needed to be sure he wasn't going insane. Because if this was true, if Meghan had really been with Andrew during that window, then everything he believed about the past 5 years had just been obliterated. The letter's final words. Before we move on, there's one last part of the letter you need to know. It wasn't just a vague confession. It ended with a plea. Please forgive me. I never meant to hurt anyone. I thought it would go away. I thought I could pretend. But if this ever finds you, know that I loved you more than he ever could. He. That word again. Meghan never named him directly. Not once. But the pattern was there. The location. The timeline. The secrecy. Harry wasn't stupid. And once he allowed his brain to accept the possibility, everything else started to fall into place. The next move. By morning, Harry had already made calls. To former palace staffers. To a medical clinic in Geneva. To a midwife he remembered from Archie's birth who had abruptly disappeared after the delivery. He was retracing steps, reopening wounds, reconstructing a timeline that had never quite made sense, but which he'd always been too afraid to question. And as he dug deeper, something terrifying began to emerge. This wasn't just about Meghan. This wasn't just about him. This might have involved an entire operation to cover it up. Because 1 week after that letter was dated, a high-level royal press officer stepped down without explanation. 2 weeks after that, the medical staff at Meghan's London clinic were replaced. 3 weeks after that, a certain nanny was quietly dismissed with a severance package triple the standard rate. Coincidence? Or cover-up? Harry was about to find out. Because when he opened the second box from Diana's storage unit, he didn't just find memories. He found evidence. And what was tucked at the bottom, under a false panel, would send this story into a new dimension. A dimension filled with blackmail, bloodlines, and a betrayal no one was prepared to face. What happens when the dates don't line up, but the baby still arrives? That's the question that began haunting Prince Harry the moment he pieced together the inconsistencies. At first, it felt like paranoia, wishful thinking, maybe even grief masquerading as suspicion. But once he held Meghan's old letter in one hand and a stack of official documents in the other, the illusion began to crack. The kind of crack you can't unsee. Because the truth is, Meghan Markle's pregnancy timeline, from conception to delivery, was never quite what it seemed. And the deeper Harry looked, the stranger it all became. The palace announcement that sparked questions. Let's go back to the official record. The palace announced Meghan's pregnancy on October 15, 2018, right at the start of the Sussex's royal tour in Australia. She stepped off the plane in Sydney in a figure-hugging white dress, gently cupping her lower belly. The world went wild. "Baby Sussex is on the way," headlines screamed. But here's the catch. Meghan was said to be 12 weeks pregnant at the time of the announcement. That would place the conception somewhere in mid-July 2018. So far, so good, right? Not quite. Because palace insiders, the ones who handled her travel, medical appointments, and wardrobe fittings, later whispered that the timeline fell off. That they were being asked to play along with a story that didn't fully add up. One aide, anonymously quoted in a now-buried tabloid piece, said, "The bump appeared overnight. 1 week she was flat as ever, the next, full-on baby glow. And yet, she refused scans. She insisted on natural intuition. That's not how it works. This sudden bump phenomenon. Let's break that down. If Meghan was 12 weeks along in mid-October, she would have just started showing. But photos from just 3 weeks earlier, during her appearance at a London charity event, show no bump whatsoever. Not even a hint. Fast forward 2 weeks to the Australian tour, and suddenly, she's visibly pregnant. Even experienced maternity nurses have commented online, subtly, carefully, that this kind of jump in appearance is highly unusual without twins, which it wasn't, or unless the pregnancy is further along than stated. So now we're faced with two possibilities. Meghan was hiding the bump until it was too obvious to conceal, or she wasn't actually 12 weeks at the time of the announcement. And if she wasn't 12 weeks, if she was actually 18 or 20, then conception would have taken place in May or June. And where was Harry during that time? That's where things take a very dark turn. Harry's travel logs, the missing weeks. In late May through mid-June 2018, Harry had several solo royal engagements. A charity polo match in Rome. A solo diplomatic event in Botswana. A brief surprise trip to Scotland, one that Meghan did not join. He was gone for at least 3 separate windows, and Meghan was not present at any of those stops. She was spotted in London, reportedly resting, following the frenzy of their May wedding. It was in this window, early June, that Meghan allegedly took a private, unannounced trip to Balmoral. And according to flight manifests leaked by an anonymous pilot, a private jet registered to a known royal associate flew from London to Aberdeen on June 8, returning June 11. Passenger listed, M. Mountbatten Windsor. Companion, personal security. Destination, Balmoral Castle. Now, the royal family doesn't comment on private visits. But sources close to the estate have confirmed Prince Andrew was there at the time, reportedly avoiding public scrutiny as fresh Epstein-related stories started circling again. Coincidence? Or calculated? The Balmoral theory gains momentum. Let's return to the math. If Meghan became pregnant during that early June Balmoral visit, rather than in mid-July, then the dates match a 20-week pregnancy at the time of the October 15th announcement, which matches the visual evidence, the bump, the wardrobe, the rapid changes. But it also raises an explosive possibility. If Harry wasn't in the same country during the critical conception window, who was? And more importantly, who had motive and opportunity? Enter Prince Andrew, a man with a decades-long history of secrecy, of using power to obscure scandal, of operating in the shadows while others took the fall. Could it really be possible? Did Meghan and Andrew have a private moment, a drunken mistake, a planned encounter, a whispered arrangement? Harry didn't want to believe it. But what happened next made it harder to deny. The ultrasound that didn't exist. Every royal pregnancy is meticulously documented. Security, protocol, press control, medical oversight. But with Meghan's, something strange happened. When asked for a routine press release detailing due dates, OB/GYN confirmation, and scan locations, as had been done with Kate Middleton's pregnancies, the palace refused to comment. Reporters were stonewalled. One royal correspondent wrote, "We received nothing. No ultrasound photos. No OB names. Not even a confirmed hospital." In fact, it wasn't until well into the third trimester that the media were even allowed to speculate on a due date, sometime in spring. And the birth itself? Shrouded in mystery. Unlike William and Kate, who posed on the Lindo Wing steps just hours after delivery, Meghan and Harry released no photo for 2 days. The first image of Archie was inside Windsor Castle, with a heavily filtered lens and a remarkably hidden baby face. But here's where it gets even stranger. According to leaked medical records obtained by a now-defunct British investigative outlet, no formal ultrasound scan was ever logged under Meghan Markle's NHS profile at any London hospital in 2018. Let that sink in. No scan, no images, no clinical paper trail, only a private midwife listed. A woman who disappeared shortly after Archie's birth, and who allegedly died in a boating accident months later. Her name? Rebecca Lanford. You'll hear more about her in a later chapter. But for now, remember this. The absence of evidence is evidence when everything else is controlled. Harry's personal notes reveal growing doubt. In a leaked audio diary Harry recorded during a therapy session, part of a podcast series he later canceled, he admitted to feelings of deep unease during Meghan's pregnancy. "I felt out of sync with her, like I was watching from the outside. Sometimes I'd ask how far along she was, and she'd give vague answers. I assumed it was anxiety. Now I wonder if it was something else." These recordings were never meant to go public, but one audio engineer, who claimed he was deeply disturbed by what he heard, leaked them to a journalist, under the condition his name not be used. And in that audio, you can hear it. The cracking voice, the hesitation, the heartbreak. Harry didn't know. He was trying to believe the woman he loved, but his gut kept whispering otherwise. Meghan's contradictory statements. In multiple interviews, Meghan gave inconsistent accounts of her pregnancy. In 2019, she told one outlet she wasn't showing until 6 months in. In another interview, she said she felt flutters in early July, which would place conception in May. She claimed morning sickness hit in August, but also said she traveled comfortably during her entire first trimester. Even doctors raised eyebrows. Her symptoms didn't match her stated dates, said one OB/GYN on social media. Either the interviews were misquoted, or she was deliberately misdirecting. But here's the irony. Meghan has built a brand on truth, on authenticity, on her narrative. Yet in this case, the story kept changing, which raises a painful question. Was she hiding something? Or protecting someone? And either way, what was Harry supposed to believe? The final straw, a journalist's leaked draft. Just when Harry began to calm down, believing perhaps his mind was playing tricks on him, a journalist reached out with a chilling message. A well-known royal reporter, who had been sitting on a story for years, sent a draft headline to a source close to Harry. The Secret Prince. Was Meghan's pregnancy covered up to protect Andrew? The article was never published. The outlet was threatened with lawsuits. The reporter was demoted. The draft disappeared. But the existence of that headline proved one thing. Other people knew. Harry wasn't imagining it. He wasn't alone. And now that the veil was lifting, the entire timeline, from conception to delivery, looked less like a celebration and more like a carefully constructed alibi. So where do we go from here? The inconsistencies are stacking up. The dates don't match. The medical records are missing. The witness accounts are surfacing. And now, Harry's rage has turned to something even more dangerous. Determination. Because the next person on his list, the one who might finally tell the truth, wasn't Meghan. It was a woman who had seen everything and kept silent for too long. The nanny. And what she revealed would blow this entire story wide open. What do you think happens when two people, both under scrutiny, both with something to hide, find themselves alone behind castle walls with no cameras, no press, and no accountability? Balmoral Castle has long been a place of refuge for the royal family. Secluded, vast, and steeped in royal history, it's the one location where scandal doesn't chase you, because scandal can't get in. Or at least, that's what they believed. But it was at Balmoral, on one crisp evening in June 2018, that something allegedly occurred between Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew, something that would later unravel Prince Harry's world. This wasn't part of the fairy tale. This was the footnote no one wanted you to read. Until now, the visit that wasn't publicized. No press cameras, no social media posts, no royal announcement. Meghan's trip to Balmoral in early June 2018 was never acknowledged publicly. In fact, her presence there was only discovered after private aviation logs were leaked months later by a whistleblower working at Aberdeen Airport. According to those records, a small private jet chartered under the name Windsor Holdings landed at 4:53 p.m. on June 8. Passenger manifest. M. Mountbatten Windsor. Personal Protection Officer. 1 luggage attendant. Destination, Balmoral Estate. That's it. No senior royals were listed. No engagement scheduled. It was supposedly a wellness retreat. But here's where it gets murky. Andrew's alibi falls apart. Prince Andrew's team, when asked later about his whereabouts during that weekend, claimed he was at a private event with friends abroad. But internal palace security logs, never intended for the public, painted a very different picture. According to a former royal security officer, Prince Andrew was at Balmoral on those exact dates. He had allegedly gone there under the guise of privacy and retreat, avoiding public appearances while news stories connected to Jeffrey Epstein were bubbling again in the tabloids. So, two people, both controversial in their own ways, found themselves alone on the Queen's remote estate. No William, no Charles, no Queen Elizabeth at that time. She was on a state visit to Sandringham. Just Meghan and Andrew, and one evening that would change everything. The staff that heard too much. It was the night of June 9th, just past 10 p.m. A light rain had begun falling outside, turning the stone pathways slick. Most of the estate's staff had gone to bed, with the exception of a skeleton night crew, 2 maids, 1 security detail, and a kitchen porter. That porter, later dismissed after unauthorized conversations with press, claimed he saw something strange. She was wearing a burgundy robe, not formal clothing. He was in a navy tracksuit. They were walking closely, laughing. She touched his arm. That same night, a maid reported hearing voices in the East Wing's sitting room. Heated, emotional, then quiet. When questioned by senior staff the next morning, she reportedly said, "It didn't sound romantic. It sounded complicated." That's an understatement. Because if the timeline of Meghan's pregnancy points toward that window, then this wasn't just a late-night conversation. It may have been something far more intimate and far more dangerous. The whisper that sparked a cover-up. According to a now-silenced aide, who left the royal household abruptly in 2019, Meghan and Andrew had a closed-door meeting on the second night of her stay. What was discussed? No one knows for certain. But that same aide overheard something chilling while walking past the drawing room. "You said this would never come back to me," Meghan allegedly whispered. "I handled Harry. You handle the rest." Pause. What rest? Was it about public perception? Medical documentation? A paternity cover-up? The implication was clear. A deal had been struck. Lines had been crossed. Secrets were being negotiated. And all of it, took place in the one royal estate with no cameras, no recordings, no press. Just silence, secrecy, and shadows. The forgotten photo. A now-vanished royal staffer, one of the security officers assigned to Meghan's visit, once captured a blurry photo on his phone. It showed Meghan and Andrew standing by the garden pond, deep in conversation. This photo was never released to the public, but according to a tabloid editor who saw it briefly, the two figures were unmistakable. It wasn't casual. It was intense. He was leaning in, like he was pleading. She looked calm. Too calm. That photo disappeared shortly after the officer was terminated for inappropriate access to royal property. But the image lingered in the minds of those who saw it, because it contradicted every official statement. There was no brief encounter. There was no group setting. There was no chance meeting. There was a deliberate interaction between Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew when no one else was watching. A pattern of disappearances. Here's something strange. Within 3 months of Meghan's Balmoral visit, for people connected to the estate either resigned or were reassigned. One maid, gone. One kitchen porter, gone. One security officer, reassigned to Sandringham. One groundskeeper, vanished from royal employment altogether. Each had been on duty the weekend of June 8th to 11th. Each had potentially seen or heard something they weren't supposed to. And each was given a generous severance package, far above normal for their roles. Why? What were they paid to forget? And why was Balmoral, a place of rest, suddenly a site of personnel purges? Meghan's return to London. After that weekend, Meghan flew back to London quietly. No paparazzi caught the flight. No sightings were made. Her public reappearance came nearly a week later at a charity gala, wearing a loose-fitting black dress and avoiding most of the press line. One tabloid ran a headline, "Is Meghan hiding a baby bump already?" The palace shot it down immediately. But behind closed doors, aides were whispering. The mood had shifted. One staffer described Meghan's return as guarded, private, and slightly off. She canceled 2 meetings, took time off, requested multiple doctors, not for care, but for wellness consultations. The whispers grew louder, and someone, likely within the palace, made a decision. The public timeline would begin in July. Nothing before that would be acknowledged. And so, the deception began. Andrew's sudden silence. Meanwhile, Prince Andrew disappeared from public engagements for nearly a month. No public statements. No events. No cameras. The palace claimed he was taking time for private matters. When he finally reemerged, he looked tired, pale, distracted. And when asked about Meghan's pregnancy announcement, which had just gone public in October, Andrew gave an unusually short, muted response. Yes, wonderful news, of course. No warmth, no elaboration, no follow-up. Almost like someone who didn't want to get too close to a story that might come back to haunt him. Almost like someone who knew something. The Queen's private concerns. One final detail, and this one matters. According to a former palace aide, Queen Elizabeth II was quietly briefed about Meghan's Balmoral visit weeks later, and was not pleased. She reportedly made the following comment to a senior advisor. "I don't know what she was doing here, and I don't want to." Translation? Even the Queen understood that something had happened and chose not to dig. Why? Because sometimes, in royal life, the worst truth is the one that confirms the thing everyone already fears. That the damage is done, and silence is the only protection left. So what really happened at Balmoral? Was it a simple misunderstanding? A conversation taken out of context? Or was it the origin point of a scandal that would threaten to topple a prince and shatter a marriage? We may never know everything that occurred between Meghan and Andrew that weekend, but one woman did know something. She was there. She cleaned the rooms. She folded the robes. She watched the movements. She was the nanny. And when Harry tracked her down, she didn't just confirm his fears, she gave him something that changed everything. Would you dare open a sealed envelope, knowing it could destroy your marriage, your legacy, and your peace of mind in one crushing blow? Prince Harry did, but not because he wanted to, because he had no choice. After the letter, after the timeline discrepancies, after the staff whispers and the Balmoral trip that wouldn't die in his mind, Harry needed proof. Hard evidence. Not hearsay, not instinct, not emotion. He needed something science couldn't lie about. And what he uncovered would ignite a fire so volatile, even Buckingham Palace couldn't control it. Because DNA doesn't play politics. It doesn't bend to loyalty. And it doesn't care who wears the crown. The whisper that started it all. It started with a whisper, the kind that slithers through staff corridors and never leaves the marble halls of Kensington. A former midwife, known only as Clara in redacted court files, allegedly told a close friend. There was a second sample, one for the official record and one for private testing. At first, this seemed like nonsense. Paranoia. But Clara's name surfaced again months later in a confidential legal deposition, part of an unrelated medical malpractice case. Buried in the transcript was one curious line. I was instructed to collect 2 separate umbilical samples for baby Sussex. One went to a London lab. The other, well, I don't know where it ended up. Harry's blood ran cold when he saw that file. 2 samples? Why? And more importantly, who ordered the second one? The test that was never supposed to happen. Private DNA tests aren't new for the royals. In fact, the practice is more common than people think, a precaution, especially in a family where reputation is everything. But what made this test suspicious wasn't just that it happened. It's that no one admitted it did. When Harry questioned senior palace aides, no one had a record of it. When he contacted the London lab mentioned in the court documents, they flatly denied any such request had been made. But the whistleblower, a lab tech now living abroad under a pseudonym, told a different story. Via encrypted messages, they claimed. We received a sample marked Subject A, no names, just a royal courier and a request for discreet handling. The instructions were clear. Test paternity against Subject H and destroy all traces post-confirmation. Subject H. That was him. Harry. The results that were buried. According to the tech, the results were uploaded to a private server, available for download to a password-protected account, allegedly accessed by a private legal entity tied to Clarence House. But before the results could be printed or copied, the file was scrubbed. Gone. Deleted remotely. Highly irregular, the tech said. In 20 years of testing, I've never seen a result vanish like that. Luckily, one junior employee, suspicious of the secrecy, made a backup, an encrypted USB drive. They didn't do it to blackmail. They did it out of fear. They knew if something went wrong, someone would come looking for that result. And when the monarchy is involved, people vanish. Stories die. Files get wiped. But not this time, because that tech still had the USB. And after a series of indirect back channels and intermediaries, it made its way to Harry through an anonymous parcel delivered to his Montecito address. Harry's breakdown. Tell me this is fake. According to a staff member present that day, Harry received the package in the late afternoon. A small brown envelope. No return address. Just his name. Inside, a USB. No note. He immediately called one of his private cybersecurity contacts, a former MI6 analyst now working freelance in California. Together, they decrypted the file. What they found? A document titled, Subject A Paternity Probability Matrix. The result? Paternity exclusion, 99.98%. Subject H is not the biological father of Subject A. Harry stared at the screen for a full minute. Then he collapsed back into the leather chair, silent. No screaming, no shouting, just silence. Finally, he whispered, "Tell me this is fake." But the analyst just shook his head. The encryption was real. The data trail was traceable. The document's timestamp matched the exact date the palace had claimed. No tests were conducted. And the test? Authenticated beyond a doubt. The flashback to the birth. Suddenly, Harry's memory of Archie's birth began playing in reverse, but with new meaning. The tension. The midwife who avoided eye contact. The flurry of palace PR requests. The delay in releasing the name. The strange insistence from Meghan that they skip the Lindo wing tradition. At the time, Harry had chalked it up to Meghan's anxiety about the press. Now, it looked like camouflage, designed to avoid scrutiny, designed to keep the truth buried. And that truth? He wasn't the father, the hidden medical entry. But Harry wasn't done. Now obsessed with proving, or disproving, the results, he dug into archived records from the birth. And that's when he found it. A hidden note in the delivery log. Not a full medical record. Just a scribbled side entry. Alt paternal referral requested. Fulfilled by Geneva lab. Details suppressed. Why was a lab in Switzerland involved? Why was a paternity referral sent outside the UK? And who had the authority to suppress those details? One name kept resurfacing in whispers, in memos, and in signed notes. Prince Andrew. And suddenly, everything pointed back to Balmoral. Meghan's reaction, the final shatter. After 2 sleepless nights, Harry confronted Meghan. She was preparing for a Zoom call, in a silk blouse and earrings. Smiling, composed, he handed her the printed results. She read them carefully, then looked up and asked, "Where did you get this?" Not "this isn't true." Not "this is insane." Not "I can explain." Just, "Where did you get this?" That was the final crack. Harry's voice broke. "Is it true?" Silence. Then, "I didn't want to hurt you." That was all she said. No denial. No defense. And that silence? It was louder than any confession. The family he thought he had. In the days that followed, Harry spiraled. He stayed in the guest house. Shut off his phone. Didn't eat for 2 days. Staff described him as ghost-like. Wandering. He stared at old photos of Archie, looking for himself in the child's face. A chin, a freckle, a dimple. Something. But there was nothing. The boy he raised, the son he protected, might have royal blood, just not his. And now, Harry was left with an impossible choice. Stay and keep the secret, live a lie for the sake of the child, or blow the whole thing wide open. He hadn't decided yet, but he knew one thing. He needed answers, and the only person who might have them, someone who had been there from the beginning, was a woman long forgotten by the media. The nanny. Not just any nanny. The one Meghan let go abruptly just weeks after Archie's birth. Why? Because she had seen everything. And when Harry tracked her down, she didn't just speak. She showed him something he would never forget. If walls could talk, the nursery in Frogmore Cottage would scream. But walls don't talk. People do. And sometimes, it's the people who are dismissed, silenced, or paid off who hold the keys to secrets that could bring down an entire monarchy. In this chapter, we meet the woman who saw too much. The one who rocked the cradle while chaos brewed behind closed doors. The one who was quietly removed, scrubbed from the records, and forced into silence. Until now. Because this nanny, known only as Eliza in court filings, didn't just witness suspicious behavior. She documented it. And what she kept hidden in her private journal, and in one chilling photograph, would later land in Prince Harry's hands. What she saw confirmed his darkest fears. And what she heard would haunt him forever. The perfect hire. Until she wasn't. Eliza was hired in March 2019, about 6 weeks before Archie's official birth announcement. She was no ordinary caregiver. A highly trained maternity nurse with 15-plus years of elite experience. She had worked with foreign diplomats, royal cousins, and even a Hollywood A-lister or two. She was vetted thoroughly, background checked, cleared, interviewed personally by Meghan and Doria. Eliza was calm, efficient, respectful. She took notes, followed protocol, and, according to multiple sources, never stepped out of line. Until the day she did. The first red flag, midnight panic, in her handwritten journal. Later authenticated by a UK forensics firm, Eliza described a disturbing incident during one of her first overnight shifts. 2:38 a.m. Loud voices downstairs. Sounded like a fight. Baby was asleep. Heard someone say, "This was never supposed to go this far." Another voice, male, said, "What if he finds out?" Eliza had no idea what it meant. At the time, she assumed it was a marital argument. But now, looking back, she's convinced it was about the paternity cover-up. The tension in the household was growing. Staff were rotated frequently. Schedules were changed at the last minute. And Meghan's behavior, Eliza noted, was highly controlled, friendly in public, cold in private. Still, Eliza did her job, until she started asking questions. The bottle incident. One of the more bizarre entries in Eliza's journal involves a feeding bottle. Asked where the breast milk was stored. Was told to use formula only. Pressed again. Was told, that's not necessary. He doesn't take to it well. Strange. Baby showed signs of rejection. Why does this matter? Because Meghan had previously gone on record, in interviews and during her ITV documentary, stating that she was committed to breastfeeding. So why the sudden switch? Why the secrecy? And more importantly, why the fear when Eliza asked routine questions? She began to suspect something wasn't right. The child's sleeping patterns were irregular. Crying was reportedly staged for certain visitors, stopped too quickly, started too conveniently. And then there was the photo, the velvet pouch. On May 27, 2019, Eliza was tasked with organizing the baby's dresser drawers. While sorting through a stack of receiving blankets, she noticed something odd wedged in the back of the top drawer, a small velvet pouch, wine-colored, no royal monogram. She opened it. Inside, a folded piece of paper and a small 3x4 glossy photo. The paper was a scan receipt from a private ultrasound clinic in Switzerland. The name on the form wasn't Mountbatten Windsor. It wasn't even Markle. It read, Client, Windsor A. Date, October 6, 2018. Scan, fetal profile, 20-week. That alone raised every alarm in Eliza's mind. But the photo, the ultrasound image didn't look like Archie. It was an early scan. Skeletal structure, blurred shadows. But even to an untrained eye, the head size and fetal development appeared far more advanced than expected for a pregnancy publicly announced just 10 days later. Eliza was stunned. She carefully put everything back, but before she did, she snapped a photo of the pouch's contents, a habit she'd developed after years of working for high-profile clients. She never showed it to anyone. Until Harry. The abrupt dismissal. 2 days later, Eliza was terminated. No explanation. No warning. No severance negotiation. She was handed a folder, a generic HR document, and told her services were no longer required. She was also asked to sign an NDA on the spot, but Eliza, feeling cornered, refused. She kept a copy of her journal. She kept the photo. And after months of failed attempts to report what she'd seen through official palace channels, she moved abroad. Quietly. Alone. Until one day, her name resurfaced on a discreet list Harry's private investigator was building. People close to the pregnancy, who had gone silent. Harry contacted her under a false name at first, but once she knew it was him, she agreed to meet. The meeting that changed everything. According to sources familiar with the encounter, Harry flew to a neutral location, Geneva, Switzerland, and met Eliza at a private cafe near the lake. She brought the photo, the journal, her voice. For 2 hours, she told him everything. The late-night arguments, the velvet pouch, the ultrasound, the inconsistencies. The moment Meghan allegedly told her, in a whisper, "You're paid to care for him, not to question his past." Eliza broke down in tears. She didn't want to betray anyone. But she said, "If that child is being raised in a lie, he deserves to know. And so do you." Harry didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just stared at the photo. Then he asked, "Did Meghan ever mention Andrew?" Eliza nodded. Slowly. "Only once. When you weren't home. She took a call, and I overheard her say, 'I covered for you once. I won't do it again.'" The photo that broke the illusion. That ultrasound photo, now authenticated by 2 independent labs, became the smoking gun in Harry's private investigation. Because the date, the scan type, the fetal development stage, they didn't match Meghan's official timeline. In fact, they matched exactly what a 20-week fetus would look like if conception had taken place in early June 2018, the very weekend Meghan visited Balmoral. And the initials, A. Windsor, could stand for Andrew, could stand for Archie, or could stand for something far more disturbing, a medical alias used by high-profile clients to shield identity, one commonly used by the Duke of York's private staff. Coincidence? Or calculated? Meghan's response, the denial that wasn't. When confronted with Eliza's name and the photo, Meghan didn't fly into rage. She didn't sue. She didn't even issue a denial. Instead, she said, "That woman breached a sacred trust. She should be ashamed." Not a word about the photo. Not a word about the velvet pouch. Just rage at being exposed. And when Harry pressed further, Meghan simply said, "What matters now is the life we've built, not the past." But for Harry, the past had caught up. And it was staring at him in high-definition grayscale. So now, with evidence in hand, Harry had a choice. Tell the world? Or confront the man who might be at the center of it all? Because if Eliza's account was accurate, if the ultrasound was real, if the DNA test didn't lie, then Harry wasn't just betrayed by his wife. He was betrayed by his uncle. And there was only one way to find out what really happened at Balmoral. Ask Prince Andrew himself. What do you do when the man you've suspected all along suddenly confesses? Not in public, not in court, not even in a face-to-face confrontation, but in a private voice message, never meant to be heard by anyone outside his inner circle, that found its way to the one person it was never meant to reach. Prince Harry. And once he hit play, there was no going back. Because this wasn't some rumor. This wasn't staff gossip. This wasn't Meghan dodging another question. This was Andrew. Talking. rambling, admitting, and somewhere between his desperate self-justification and breathy confessions, Harry heard something that made his blood run cold. If the truth ever gets out, they'll never forgive her or me. The mysterious Swiss connection. It began with a flurry of encrypted messages from a Swiss-based lawyer who had ties to multiple high-net-worth individuals, including, allegedly, a former Epstein associate. This lawyer wasn't a whistleblower. He wasn't interested in justice. He was interested in leverage. He reached out to Harry's security detail via a burner email, claiming to have a recording of high royal interest involving Prince Andrew and an unnamed woman from California. At first, Harry thought it was a scam, but then a second message came in, this time with a voice sample attached. 10 seconds. Just 10 seconds. But enough to identify Andrew's voice. You don't understand, she made promises. She said she had it handled. She said the child would never be a problem. The accent, the phrasing, the cadence. It was unmistakable. Harry was stunned. He agreed to meet. The hotel room exchange. Geneva, an upscale boutique hotel tucked into a quiet corner near the lake. No press, no staff, just Harry, his private advisor, and the lawyer. No names, no small talk. The lawyer handed over a small flash drive. If you destroy this after listening, the man said, you'll never hear from me again. Harry took it without a word. Back in his suite, he loaded the file and hit play. The confession no one was supposed to hear. The recording was over 16 minutes long. Timestamped, November 2020. Context, unknown. But what was captured on that tape was chilling. It started mid-sentence, clearly part of a longer rant. And I told her. I said this can't be traced. We both have too much to lose. But she was convinced he'd never find out. Thought she could manage him. Like she managed everything else. Harry's hands were shaking. He kept listening. Andrew's voice continued. It was one night. Balmoral was quiet. No one else around. We drank. Talked. She was persuasive. Not that I'm blaming her, but she knew what she was doing. Then silence, followed by a deep breath. I should have stopped it. God knows I should have stopped it. But I was in too deep. And then she vanished. No calls. No word. Then boom. She's pregnant, and the dates don't line up. I knew right then. I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Harry hit pause. He stood up. Paced. His mouth was dry. His ears were ringing. But there was more. The deal they made. The next section of the recording revealed something even more disturbing. We had to make it disappear. No public trail. I pulled favors, Switzerland, private scan, made sure the records were sealed. I paid more than I care to admit. She handled the narrative. Said the child would be his. Said she could sell it. Said she could sell anything. At this point, Harry reportedly muttered aloud to the empty room. Oh my God. The admission wasn't vague anymore. It was crystal clear. Andrew had engaged in an encounter with Meghan and believed the child she carried might be his. He didn't say Archie's name. He didn't say Meghan's either. But he didn't have to. Harry knew exactly who he was talking about. She played us both. One line in particular broke Harry. She played us both. Him with the fairy tale. Me with the secret. She always said she wanted out of obscurity. She got her crown. I got my silence. And he got the lie. It wasn't just betrayal. It was orchestration. Harry sat in stunned silence for 5 minutes after the tape ended. He played it again. And again. Each time, he picked up new pieces. The implication of hush money. The reference to a pouch of documents stored in a Swiss bank vault. The phrase, he doesn't even look like him. That last one hurt the most. Andrew, the man Harry once called a disgrace to the family, was mocking his own bond with Archie. Meghan's name finally slips out. In the final 2 minutes of the tape, Andrew grows emotional. His voice trembles, almost like he regrets everything. I never meant for it to go this far. She begged me to leave it buried. Said it would ruin Harry. Said it would ruin the firm. I didn't want another scandal. But Meghan, she always had a way of bending reality. There it was. The name. No longer ambiguous. No longer veiled. Andrew had confirmed it. Meghan. Balmoral. A child. A secret. And now Harry had proof. Harry's next move. Internal war. That night, Harry didn't sleep. He sat alone in the corner of the hotel room, staring at the Geneva skyline, the USB drive clenched in his hand like a loaded weapon. He knew what this meant. If he released the tape, it would shatter Andrew's already fragile reputation. possibly implicate him in another scandal, just as the royal family was trying to restore credibility. But it would also destroy Meghan. It would confirm everything, and it would place Archie in the center of a media inferno. So Harry made a call, not to a lawyer, not to the press, but to his therapist. According to insiders, the call lasted 90 minutes. And when it ended, Harry issued a single directive to his team. Find the vault. Find the pouch. I want every piece of this. Not for the world. For Archie. So he knows one day why everything fell apart. The Swiss vault. Clues within clues. The tape referenced a pouch, one Meghan allegedly used to hide sensitive documents. That pouch, Andrew claimed, had been placed in a vault in Geneva, under a shell company tied to a now-defunct charity called Royal Heritage Foundation. Through a network of investigative journalists and legal researchers, Harry's team discovered the vault did exist. Inside, unknown. Access denied, unless Harry could prove legal interest. But if the pouch did exist, and if it contained early pregnancy documents, financial trails, or private communications, it could serve as the final nail in the narrative Meghan had built around the fairy tale Sussex family. And as Harry dug deeper into Swiss bank regulations, one thing became clear. Someone else had recently requested access. And it wasn't Andrew. It was Meghan. She had tried to retrieve the pouch, and failed. Which meant it was still there. Now Harry had the tape, the DNA, the nanny's photo, and a path to the vault. But he wasn't the only one closing in. Because someone, quietly, in the shadows, had begun leaking. And the press? They were sniffing around. A royal journalist had just posted a cryptic tweet. A second royal paternity scandal may be closer than we think. Stay tuned. Harry had to act fast. But the next step wouldn't involve lawyers or journalists. It would involve a publicist, a scandal fixer, and the man who helped Meghan navigate her way into the Soho House elite. His name? Marcus Anderson. And what he knew would blow the lid off everything. What's more dangerous than a scandal? A controlled scandal. Because when a royal crisis hits, it isn't the chaos that causes the most damage, it's the carefully staged calm. The press releases, the distraction stories, the smiling photos, the relentless machine of image protection. And no one does damage control like the British royal family. But what happens when the machine turns against its own? When the same people paid to protect you start using your secrets as leverage. That's exactly what happened to Prince Harry. Because the second rumors began swirling about Archie's paternity, the palace PR team didn't rush in to support him. They did something far more calculated and far more cruel. They buried him. The panic behind the curtains. It began with a seemingly unrelated tabloid headline in early 2025. New lawsuit threatens to expose private royal medical records. The story focused on an obscure civil case involving a media rights group and a whistleblower trying to unseal health-related documents tied to royal charities. But Harry recognized the date mentioned in the article, May 2019. That was the month Archie was born. He felt his stomach twist, because suddenly, newsrooms were getting curious. Twitter was full of questions. Why was there no hospital photo? Why was Archie's delivery kept secret? Why were all medical records sealed tighter than the crown jewels? In short, what were they hiding? And while the world speculated, the palace remained silent. Too silent. The distraction strategy. According to leaked internal emails later obtained by a royal communications intern turned whistleblower, the palace PR team had crafted a distraction playbook. Specifically for use when the Sussex family presents an optics risk. One section, chillingly titled Paternity Protocol, outlined this approach. If suspicions are raised about the legitimacy of parentage, immediately deploy one of the following distraction narratives. Renewed feud with Prince William. Duchess Meghan's mental health journey. New philanthropic initiative. Emotional footage of Archie *. Sound familiar? Every time whispers about Archie's parentage surfaced, headlines would conveniently pivot. Meghan reveals struggles with postpartum depression. Prince Harry. My father stopped taking my calls. Archie's adorable accent in new video. Coincidence? Or calculated PR diversion? Harry now believed the latter. Because he discovered something else. The playbook was signed off by a name he hadn't seen in months. Jason Knopf. Jason Knopf and the double game. Jason Knopf, the former communications secretary for both the Cambridges and Sussexes, was once considered loyal to